I thought we could start off by doing, if you guys wanted to maybe introduce yourself, because your bios were really long and I tried to cut them down and then I was like, all of this is too awesome. And I didn't want to jump into it and like cut something that you felt special to your souls. And I think what we'll also do before we do intros is just share with people that what we're going to be talking about today is the experience women have in corporate Canada and why there's some stickiness around that, and like how do we identify and unpack that stickiness and give action items to, you know, corporate spaces and workspaces to be more inclusive and safe and holistic for women and other marginalized communities to thrive. So we'll start maybe with Rhiannon, if you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you, and then we'll jump into this very exciting subject.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sam. So my name is Rhiannon, and I am, I've sort of been best known as the president and CEO of the Economic Club of Canada. So that was a position that I held for over a decade. And so what that means is that I've been really at the table with corporate Canada now for the last decade. And it's been an interesting ride. And I've just transitioned into creating this new platform, which is called Conscious Economics. And Conscious Economics is really all about preparing folks for the future of work in this new lens, where we see consciousness as a currency, meaning that a deeper awareness around the issues and how they're impacting us emotionally, physically, spiritually, looking through, you know, new lenses when we think about work. And so, yeah, really excited to be here tonight and to talk a little bit more. I mean, there's so many other things, but that kind of gives you a gist. And I know I've interacted with a lot of people that I see joining. So it's great to be here tonight, and I'll pass it over to Aseel.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to be here as well. My journey started when I was turning 20, I got my first job in the bank. And I left around the time I was turning 30. So I spent a decade in the Canadian banking system. I worked at 4 out of the 5 major Canadian banks. And my last position there was the role of the financial planner. I managed a portfolio of $100 million on Bay Street, and I worked with high net worth individuals, supporting them with investment strategies and different financial decisions to support their financial health. But we're going to get into some of the things I have to share about the corporate environment that I've experienced. But long story short, a lot of my clients started calling me their therapist because there's layers of money that weren't necessarily being addressed in the banking system. There's so much more to the conversation beyond the investments and the charts and the logic on a paper or spreadsheet. There was emotions and psychology and gaps in the conversation that needed so badly to be bridged for any you know, significant changes to happen in people's lives. So I actually pivoted into the world of financial therapy, went back to school to become a psychotherapist, and founded my own financial therapy practice in March 2020. I met Rhiannon end of 2020, actually, very special moment in my life, and we continued to collaborate with her. I was working with her at Conscious Economics directly last year, and now we continue to be collaborative partners through Conscious Economics and other initiatives.
Well, thank you so much. I feel like both of you are two people that I really admire, and then I also love that you're doing this sort of work that is bringing attention to something that I myself as a 30-year-old definitely has experienced and been around friends complaining about it, but they didn't feel like there was like hope. That doesn't sound like really depressing, but like it just sort of felt like, yeah, that's just how corporate Canada is, or spaces that are rooted in the patriarchy are. And I think one of my favorite parts is that you're sharing the experiences that you're hearing in these spaces. So before we get into the program, could we talk a little bit about these barriers of like emotional, social, and economic barriers that like women are facing, and maybe go from there? Because I think that feeling is what really brought me into like wanting to subscribe to this work so much.
Yeah, to start off, just to say that there has been a massive shift, and I will call it an awakening that's happened on the planet, really brought forth by the pandemic. We know that, you know, we're in a she session, so this pandemic and this recession
Sorry.
And, or and that's okay. And it's not that it hasn't impacted all of us, but women have been on the front lines of this pandemic, and in particular, so there's that piece that's happening. There's also something called the Great Resignation that's happening right now. So there are people that are leaving positions at mass like never before, and really starting to think about the ways in which we want to be remunerated. And it's not just about money anymore. And corporate Canada, sometimes it's the lure of like, I have this great paycheck, I'm never going to get this anywhere else, so I'm going to put up with the fact that my mind, body, and soul are being like, you know, just hurt in this environment. And it's not to, you know, I think our generation, millennial and Gen Z generation, there's this sense like we're asking for too much, or like, who do we think we are, coming into these spaces and demanding these things. But at the same time, we see organizations, you know, putting out an image that they want to create more equitable and inclusive workspaces. So when we step in, because we've been educated, because our generations are really passionate about these pieces, and we're kind of told to slow down too much, only in certain spaces, so you'll get like shoved over to a diversity and inclusivity, or you will be, as like we've heard this story time and time again, as a racialized person in the workspace who brings something up and is now like made the head of the committee. So it's unbelievable. It's an unbelievable time of change. And I want to say also that, you know, I approach this work because I've spent so much time with corporate Canada and being the CEO of the largest business platform in the country. And because I'm also, you know, a young woman, a millennial woman, I grew up in poverty, I have 2 children, I've experienced all of these different layers myself. And I really feel like it is time for all of us to work together to be able to align and to take this more conscious approach to work. And so this project is called Heart Work because we want to be able to feel good in our hearts about the work we do. We want to be able to use our creativity, our knowledge, our evolved mindset in the way that we think and see the world, which each generation comes onto the planet more evolved than the last. So it's not time to actually wait. It's time to step forward. It's time to ask for change and collaborate around change intergenerationally. So we approach it in a loving way. It's not about pointing fingers. It's about saying that we have to have a deeper conversation. Clearly, there's parts of the conversation that aren't being had, and there are emotional and social issues that are impacting our economic progress. Women, as racialized folks, you know, all the different intersections and layers of our identities and how we show up, we want to feel like we are needed, that we are valued, and we want to be remunerated with that value and the currency of equity and the currency of well-being, and health and happiness, as well as good pay. So anyway, I pass it on to Aseel. I can get really passionate about it. But this is sort of the thing, like it really is a time for change, and corporate Canada's losing amazing people and amazing women that could be in that beautiful pipeline to go up to senior leadership, and they're dropping out, and they've been dropping out for years, and they're dropping out now more than ever before. So we want to help because we want to see more diversity and more women up in those senior rank leadership positions, embodying the frequency of who they are, not who they have to pretend to be in order to be there. And we can get into that. Anyway, Aseel.
Yeah. One thing I want to add, actually, I remember once I was gifted by a friend a t-shirt that they custom made for me, and it said "too much women" on it, because I am too much. I'm too much of many different things that I've been told. I'm too much emotional, or too much of a idealist, or too much this or too much that. And there's this conception about millennials and our generation being the entitled generation. But what's special about the specific cohorts and the focus groups that we're holding space across the country to listen to other people's stories. And when you see your story in others sharing, and when you see the commonality that are so very much coming across, then you realize there's resonance in this message, but I'm not the odd one out. I mean, clearly, whatever I'm talking about is shared by so many of us. So it's not that I'm entitled or I'm too much or I'm all these things that I've kept for myself, internalized as messages that kept me quiet all along. Now that I see this echo across this movement, then I'm able to feel more empowered in putting this forward, because clearly there's shared experiences here, and this is ultimately what this project is about, is to highlight these shared experiences so we can do better as a system, because ultimately the system is something we create, and therefore we have the ability to change when it's no longer working for us. And quite frankly, it's not working for us.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that resonates with me so deeply, because these are like people created structures.
Yeah.
And that means that people can go in and fix those structures. They're just like, we just have to like not accept the status quo anymore. And ran into what you were saying, more and more women aren't. You know, we're stepping back from corporate Canada. Our mutual friend Gina, who's the co-founder of our project as well, like she left corporate Canada as well, because she was like, this work is not work that makes me thrive. I'm not my full self in this space. And I feel like that's one of so many other women who also are going through this experience of like minimizing themselves or trying to fit like this idea of what the space we're supposed to take up in these rooms, rather than just like bringing our brilliant, full feminine selves to these tables and just like doing the work.
Well, and it is so needed right now. So I kind of use these terms, old economy and new economy. And so old economy is everything that once was. It's the dinosaur age. It's the age of, you know, wearing a corporate identity. It's the age of leaving emotion step when you walk into the office space. And the new economy is really what we are creating right now as we awaken, as we pull the layers back and say, we are coming together to ask for more. So the new economy really thrives on this balance of being able to bring this feminine energy into policy, into, you know, business leadership. And what that really means is just honoring that emotional intelligence is just as important as logical, you know, approach to things, and that intuition belongs, and that we can decolonize these structures so that we can all thrive in this really beautiful way. And especially when I see, like when I look at the world right now and I look at the economy, and I know this maybe sounds weird, but like I want to mother it. I want to love it. I want to nurture it back to health. I really do. And everyone who's stuck in these paradigms of thinking that there's only one way of doing business, there's only one way of showing up in the world, we know that's not true. And so this new space that we're going into is about honoring each individual identity and the unique lens that we all bring, and being able to actually use that as creative currency. So that's the new economy. That's what we're all about at Conscious Economics, is creating space for this dream to actually manifest. And we have to hold it first. We have to believe it's possible, and we have to speak it. We have to speak it out into the world, and that's what we're doing. Yeah, so I think it's, anyway, I just go on a rant, but it's just so time for a change. And so we can get into a little bit of the project, but before we do, I just want to say that for anyone right now that is feeling like they are trapped in this cycle, and I know even for myself, being the first person in my family to finish high school and go to university, and then the first person in my family to have a white collar job, or like a corporate job, I really felt like I was so lucky to be there that I really had to adopt and adapt myself, because this was such a privilege. And many of you know that when I finally became the owner of the Economic Club, I turned it into a social enterprise. We started taking all the money from all of the business events we were doing across the country. I hired an amazing team of women. We became the only business platform in the country owned and operated by women. And we started to shake it up, because anything is possible. And that is something that I want everyone to know here. Like, we've been in doom and gloom and dump and frump for, 2 years here. And I can say, like, my hat's on, because I didn't wash my hair. And I've got 2 kids and we're figuring it out. But it's time for us to really, really believe that it is possible. And that's why on Canada Project, you are so inspiring to us, because again, everything that you've done has been started from wanting to connect people to the information that's going to empower them to create that change. And it's coming from heart space. And that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
I just like could listen to you talk all the time. Like
Yeah.
it's just
There
magic.
was a lot to say, that's for sure. And it's something like we just need somebody to lead this, and you're the perfect woman for this, Ree.
Well, you all are, and this is a collective initiative. And so again, with Aseel, like your story, which is so powerful, and the financial therapy piece, and the reason why I think you and I jive so deeply, before we get into a little bit more of like, what is this project tangibly and why is it designed in the way that it is, I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about what it is you do, because we do have to heal our relationship to money in the and in order to become empowered in those spaces, we need to understand where we are disempowered and why. Because of systemic racism, because of colonization, because of patriarchal structures. You know, why do we feel that money is boring, or money isn't for us to know, or it's all black and white and taught by an old man? Like, why? It's been designed that way in so many ways. Like artists and you know, innovators feeling like money is evil, so we don't know how to really, it's a part of it. So Aseel, could you talk about that a little?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, money is a big taboo, regardless which culture you come from. It is one of those topics that rarely ever that a family grew up talking about money over like a dinner table, teaching kids about money, openly having conversations around it, making purchases that are intentional, and like collectively discussing this openly. So we harbor a lot of these emotions and belief systems deep inside our psyche without even understanding them, simply because they've been hidden for so long. I mean, if you don't have awareness on something, then how can you even identify it as a problem? But when I started working as a financial planner, and regardless of the clients I was seeing, sometimes I dealt with clients who barely made ends meet. Other times I would deal with multimillionaires or high net worth individuals. And regardless, there was common denominators across these sectors of people that I started seeing. And these are the patterns of the dysfunctional behaviors, the patterns of the extreme anxiety and the stress and all these different emotions that just surfaced one conversation after the other. So I felt a deep yearning to start really creating a space for us to even explore this topic. Before we think about what the solution is, let's start asking the right questions. I felt like we needed new questions to old problems. We needed a new approach to ask, and mainly because I mean I posted this on my Instagram today. I recalled the story about a CFO at a company who made decisions about numbers every single day, and numbers were his language. It was his forte. But when he went home, dysfunctional money behaviors were such a tormenting factor for him because of this cognitive dissonance that he carried. He's like, I know numbers, I speak numbers, I run a company's financials, and yet at home, I'm struggling with financial infidelity, I'm struggling with overspending, I'm struggling with all these irrational things that I continue to do. And there's a huge shame and guilt that comes with that. So when you deal with issues like this, people who know better, it's not because they don't know what they need to do. It's because there's an emotional wound that needs to be healed, and this offers automatic room for compassion to exist in this conversation that we thought is a logical conversation, and it's not a logical conversation. Automatically, that I should have known better is now replaced with I understand why I chose money to cope with stress, to cope with my upbringing, to cope with my trauma, to cope with whatever situation I needed an escape from. And money was just a vehicle for expression for that. So there is a lot of trauma around money, and there's a lot of misguided conversations that needed to just be given a new platform to be explored under, a new microscope to look under. So financial therapy is that bridge. It's not to say that the practical pieces are not important. Of course they're important, but logic is not going to sink in when our nervous system is like in a fight or flight response, or if there's trauma that's being triggered, or if there's a lot of emotions and anxiety that we're experiencing. So we need to also explore that. And financial therapy is that bridge that helps us change how we feel, think, behave, and communicate with money, so that when we are presented with strategic ways or financial literacy workshops or seminars, then we're able to translate these concepts into changes that we do want to see sustainably in the long run.
Well,
So that's the work that I do.
I just
Yeah,
want
go ahead.
to say that the reason why I wanted you to talk about that is because money and, money is at the center of our value system in our current society. Like here, the way that we all exist is around that piece. And money has been put as, more important than the well-being of people, more important than the well-being of
Mm.
planet, what we're trying to shift out of. And so a lot of times when we talk about, women or non-binary folks or however you identify being uncomfortable in your jobs and putting up with different microaggressions or, different things that just don't feel good in your heart, but you're still there because of money. And a lot of the times, if we have these traumatic backgrounds where we've watched our families struggle and we've, been through, like, money was the reason why my mom was hid in my household. I'm a child survivor of domestic violence. Like, I had so much wrapped up in money that it prevented me sometimes from doing the things that I knew were going to be better for me because I was in that trap. And so many of us find ourselves there. We're being marketed to all the time. It's a consumer driven society. And so there's these layers that keep us in these loops. And so it's why it's such an important nugget when we're talking about issues like women in leadership. We want to dissect the emotional and social reasons and ask new questions, just like Aseel said, like, hallelujah, because we want to ask new questions to the same old problems. And we want to bring this new awakened lens that so many of us in our generation do bring. And there's no shame in that. That's beautiful. It's beautiful that we know to ask different questions. It's beautiful that we're starting to intuit and feel what our bodies feel like when we're in these spaces and places, and be able to trust that if it doesn't feel right, it's not. And it doesn't mean you have to jump out and leave, but it means that maybe there's something there that we can do, and we don't have to hold that torch individually. We are powerful together. So that really brings us to why we're doing this project. So do people want to know what we're doing?
Yeah.
It's a good segue. I think it's helpful to lay out the framework of what it is we're doing. So it's a good segue.
I just wanted to add that, like, I went to that first event. That one was in person.
Yeah.
But when the one thing that I felt in that room were all these, and I know that we had drinks afterwards, a couple of us, and we chatted about it further. And we were saying that, like, these were all things that you'd think are happening to you and your friends. And maybe it's like a one-off experience, or that one friend who has like a really healthy work environment, like that's the exception, because it kind of is right now. But that, like, it's not that exception isn't the expectation. The expectation is that our work environments are not going to feel great most of the time, and that we just have to grin and bear it. And being in those spaces where we talked about it, and there was people sharing the experiences that they were having in these different environments across different sectors, to me was really eye-opening, because you kind of know it must be affecting other women, but not in the same way as like when you're sitting there and seeing a bunch of strangers talking about it. And maybe, let's maybe talk about what this project is focusing on, and how the sort of creative way in which you are doing this hard work, because it's not like someone asked me once, like, is it a focus group? And I'm like, not really. Like, that's not the space. When you walk in there, it doesn't feel, where you sit in that, it doesn't feel like a focus group. It feels like a community, like, really quickly.
I think that, so let's talk about the project, and then we can talk about specifics and how we've approached it through this feminine lens. We can talk about that, and through this conscious economy lens. So it's a 3-year project, and the first year is all about deep listening. So we are holding these, we call them sacred containers, where we can create that safe space, mind, body, spirit, to be able to come together and to really storytell and share. And so they've been really beautiful. I want to shout out some of the other program partners that have helped us to create this and helped us to draw upon intersectional women to be at the table. So the Indigenomics Institute is with us, C Center for Young Black Professionals. Of course, the On Canada Project has helped us so much, and we're so grateful. I want to shout out to One People TO and Sheena, because Sheena's really started each beautiful session with mindfulness and us really centering our bodies, so we can feel how our bodies are reacting to each other, and we can actually feel that momentum and that power, that when someone else has the courage to share, it opens up the courage for somebody else. And so that's why our stories are such powerful currency. And then the Canadian Arab Institute is with us in this as well, which is so exciting. UN Women has been a part of our short film that we've made about some of these issues. So right now we are in that part of the project where we're going across the country. We still have another session this week that's happening in Vancouver, and then we've got another one on the 17th that's being hosted in Halifax, and then we're going to do one more for anyone who missed out, is just finding out about this now. We're going to do one more for anyone who wants to attend, and that date will be released in probably about a week or so. So you can DM either on Canada as one of the partners, or us at Conscious Economics if you're interested in getting involved and putting your stories on the record in this really loving and conscious way. The next phase is our research team is going to start to look, so everyone is anonymous within these. Of course, we see each other, but everyone's identity is kept anonymous so we can really feel comfortable to share. And then our research team will be able to look at it and pull the major trends and the major themes. And there really are themes and trends that so many of us are experiencing. We think it's just like us and our girlfriends, but it isn't. So we're being able to pull those and look at those. Then this is where it gets really interesting. Because of the work that I've been doing through the Economic Club of Canada, I do have really deep and respected relationships with corporate Canada. So I'm using that currency in year 2. We're actually inviting 10 corporate champions, large Canadian corporations, to actually be at the table to look at these findings and this data together with the women that have been involved and a part of the project along the way, for those that feel comfortable and for those who also want to join, who maybe weren't part of the focus groups but want to have a leadership position and an actual seat at the table. So in order to be a corporate champion for year 2, corporations have to agree to 2 very important things. One, that they assemble an intergenerational team to be there with them, meaning that it has to have a C-level executive, but it also has to include other young people that are within the organization and other senior management layers. The next piece that's really super cool is they have to commit by being there at the table that once we create together in analyzing this together and talking this out together and figuring out together intergenerationally, we're going to create a 10-point framework, and they have to agree to implement and try to put that framework into action in their organizations in order to even earn that seat at the table. So we will be holding them accountable. Year 3 is about really talking to them, seeing how it's working, being able to talk to the organizations and the women that are working there, and also the senior leadership, to see how we can continue to iterate and change. And the last piece that I think is really dope and exciting, and it's a different way that we approach policy and business, is we've got 3 incredible songwriters that have been traveling to all of these events. So we're going to write some music out of this. Our song is going to be produced by Serena Ryder, which is so exciting. So working with our young emerging artists. And we're also, when we put together this framework, we're going to put it together in an R-forward beautiful zine so that people can engage with this information. If you feel nervous about policy conversations, if you feel nervous about white papers, or you don't even know what that means, we need new languages to invite people into these conversations. Nobody does not belong when it comes to what we are doing here, and we really, really, truly believe that from the bottom of our heart. So we hope that we can seed real systemic change from this program. I hope you can feel like the energy that's going behind it, because this is coming from our hearts. This is our life's work. This is why we're here. This is why we're alive right now, and we believe and hold hope in our hearts that we can change, and this will help that pipeline issue. This is how we're approaching that. Believe it or not, it's like, we need more women on boards. It's like, well, let me tell you, we're going to have a whole other conversation before we figure that piece out. And we really think that this is the first part of it. Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm really pumped for this. And I love that it takes this information and that you're using that currency of knowing these people at these big tables to implement it, because otherwise we're hearing what people have to say, but we're not doing anything with it. And this is such a great way to get it out there and have people at that table. So can you maybe go over, like both of you, sort of some of the themes that have come up so far. I know it's not like a research analysis of the, like, analysis of like the themes, but
Yeah.
I'm sure you have heard a few.
Well, I'll throw the ball to you for a minute, because you've been
Yeah.
all of them.
Sure, there's really interesting themes that are coming up. First being work-life balance, or at least flexible work schedules that allow for motherhood, that allow for nurturing the household, that allow for wellness and taking care of yourself outside work hours. So this is a huge theme that's come up, whether it's women planning for motherhood or are already mothers. It's something that has been magnified more than ever in COVID, but it's definitely been a struggle before then as well. So what does going back to work look like? What does that maybe hybrid work environment look like? Or creative ways in which we can start exploring work and being measured on our productivity versus the hours we clock in a specific place. So there's a lot of conversations around that, like the nature of our work and then how it fits within our greater life and the work-life balance around that. So that's one theme that definitely has echoed over and over again in so many different parts of the country. The second being mental health. And mental health is something that a lot of companies talk about as being a big value system. If you belong to a big corporation, chances are you have benefits that cover your mental health, but that's not enough. And just having few $100s to expense at the end of the year to see a therapist or a mental health resource is not where the conversation starts and ends. There should be infrastructure that really supports this wholeheartedly. I feel like this is something that we can extremely explore even further, especially that our mental health right now is struggling. We've been in 2 years of trauma. COVID is a huge traumatic event, and we haven't even started dissecting how it's going to impact us moving forward. So mental health is another theme. The third theme I would mention as well is the theme of identity. There's lots of and identity is a big word, but there's lots of terminologies that are uncomfortable for certain women: sexualization, objectifying women, or even sometimes if a woman is identifies as a lesbian or belongs to the LGBTQ community, there's still lack of sensitivity around these topics and how they're addressed in a specific workplace. So there's not a lot of safety for women sometimes, and they're whether they're sexualized, objectified, or also being uncomfortable because they belong to the LGBTQ community and lack of awareness around that. So these are three themes that just jumped on my mind, Rhi, but I'll have you expand on others.
Well, one of the other ones that I think is so huge, and this is one that I've been so focused on because of the really interesting work of running the Economic Club of Canada, this very senior business platform, but then also making it a social enterprise and working with young people and women all across the country. So I was like always teetering in between these two worlds. And one of the things is this intergenerational divide. So this idea that especially amongst women to women, so hearing that women, managers are sometimes the worst, the worst ones to deal with. And it's actually kind of, when you compassionately and empathetically try to understand why this is happening, I think a lot of it is because women of other generations, older generations, really came up during a hard time where none of these topics were on the table whatsoever. And they really did have to endure a terrible, terrible amount of just identity shifting and molding and becoming maybe something that they didn't want to be in order to fit in. And so now when we come in all empowered and ready for this change and asking to be seen in a different way, we're almost told like, I had to endure it, so you have to endure it, or that's being felt. And so it's not across the board, but I am hearing a lot, it's more like there's a lot of men that are really sponsoring and getting on board, and it's a lot of women that are kind of being gatekeepers in some way, and especially when those women themselves have had to sacrifice the way that they raise their own children or whatever else, it becomes an expectation. So I think this is a really big thing, this intergenerational divide. And again, it's not to say we're right, they're wrong, or they're wrong, we're right. That's not how we approach any of this. We lovingly want to bring everyone together, hear each other's stories, and then really, like, let's start like figuring out solutions. Like, let's actually find solutions, but to the real problems, which means your emotional well-being is on the table. Like, your emotional well-being is important, and it is one of the most foundational pieces to being able to be successful and progressive. The other piece is that we don't just want to be treated well. In this generation, we see our world kind of crumbling and collapsing. We see our systems being strained. We see what's happening with the environment, and we want our corporations to act deeply as corporate citizens and to start to really adjust so we can feel really excited about doing the work that we're doing and feel like we are part of a collective unit that's working towards more progressive change for the planet. So even if you're at a bank, even if you're at a, you know, energy company or a transportation company or whatever that may be, there are things that companies can do, and we want to be part of that. We want to be part of those solutions. In my mind, there's like one big industry, and it's called like, let's fix the world, let's heal the world. Let's heal all systems. Let's bring, you know, this new energy into the way that we show up in hard work. And the art is capitalized because the creative energy needs to flow. We can't be stifled. There's so much innovation and ingenuity that's needed if we're really going to be able to solve some of the crises that are presenting right now. So yeah, these are the themes, and I mean, so many more, and we're not the researchers, of course, but it's just been unbelievable to feel the resonance in the room as we talk about these different issues, and yeah, just hold space for knowing that there is a better way and a better day coming.
I love that. A better way and a better day. And like, this is the work that matters. Like, I think you said something at the beginning that said, you know, every generation comes out a little bit more like evolved, a little bit more pushing the envelope, and like that's how it has to be and has been forever. And it stayed the same. So if what is our generation's thing that we do, and why can't it be this? Why can't it be healing the world? I feel like you can do it.
It's not an airy fairy, like, you know, ideological unicorn. It isn't. And again, I always say, like, our generation came in, and like the big kind of insult that people like to say is like, we're impatient, or like we don't want to like put our time in, we don't want to like do. But look at the state of things. Do we have time on our side right now? No, man, you need a generation that's like ready to go, because we're coming in on the front lines of this thing. Like, it's like we've already had the time. We had the cocktail and, you know, the like shrimp tartare, and like didn't talk about the issue. Now we're here. We want to talk about the issue. So it's just it's understanding each other, and it's also compassionately understanding where, you know, and that's why I think it's so fun in year 2 to actually get the opportunity to sit at the table with these decision makers and leaders and hear why maybe some of our ideas can't fly, or what is something else that they have to figure out or decide, because that's important too. And there's no forward motion without actually really understanding and empathetically listening to the nuances on all sides. So it's really designed that way. It's designed to create a safe container for the corporations as well, to say like, hey, maybe it can't be this, but could it be this? Or, you know, this is something that we're dealing with. Could we try that? And so this is where we, like, you know, get really excited, because this is what system change feels like. And it has to come from this loving place, which is hard when you've been feeling hurt, and when you've been feeling hardened by the experiences, and you're losing that hope. You're not excited about trying to solve it when you are at a point of exhaustion from dealing with all of these pieces. So it is that same that Aseel said, like, how do we nurture and take care of ourselves so that we can show up ready for change? Because sometimes we're not ready for any change because we're exhausted from it. So that is another piece. Yeah.
Well, thank you both for being here. Before we wrap up, maybe Aseel, you can just remind us again of when these, there's 2 more that are scheduled and then 1 more that's coming. If you can tell us about when those dates are, and if you want to join, the link for the Vancouver one is in our link in bio, but yeah, I'll let you do it.
Yeah. The Vancouver date actually is happening this Thursday, February the 10th. It's at 6:30 p.m. PST. And then we have the Halifax one next week on the 17th. It's 6 p.m. their time, so I forgot what that time is. And then we have one that we haven't set the date for, which is more an open container, because there's been a lot of overflow from different cities of people who wanted to also participate in their story sharing as well, which we will release the date for it soon. So like Rhiannon said, you can always DM Conscious Economics or On Canada Project to inquire further.
Well, thank you both for being here and sharing the Heart Work program with us. We're going to share this live and we're going to put it on our posts. And I know we've been getting a lot of questions about like a catch-all one that people could attend. So I'm pumped that it'll be coming down the road. But thank you so much for being here. I am inspired.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for all that you guys are doing. Shout out to your whole team that is doing so much incredible work. And obviously, we just love your energy. We love working with you. And we're so honored that you would turn over your very influential platform for us to talk tonight. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Bye.
Bye.